Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, a Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another video where I review your DNA and genealogy questions. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer, be sure to go to my subreddit r/GenieVlogger and ask them there. I get questions in my messages all the time and it's really hard for me to answer everyone, so this is my way of being able to answer questions while also helping out others in the community at the same time. But let's jump into it. My DNA result, I want it reviewed. And down here from the OP, I expected 100% Northern Indian and Pakistani, but I was surprised that I got 0.8% Central Asian, which makes sense since most people from North India and Pakistan came from Central Asia. But I was surprised that I had European in my DNA. Does that mean I had a European 4th to 10th great grandparent? We see Central and South Asian, 98.5%. Northern Indian Pakistani, Central Asian 0.8, North Central Asian, Northern Indian Pakistani 0.6, European 0.9%, with Southern European 0.9%, Sardinian 0.2%, and then broadly Southern European 0.7%. And then for the second image, 0.4% Cypriot, 0.2% Sardinian. The honest answer is it's hard to really say whether or not you truly have a European ancestor. For one, it's a small percentage, only 0.9%. Even more, it's Southern European and then broadly Southern European, although sure, it does give you the 0.2% Sardinian. But the main thing to pull out of that is the fact that we're talking Mediterranean. And when you're looking at Mediterranean and kind of getting into Central and West Asia, you're kind of starting to find a lot of correlations, especially when you consider all the travel and trade throughout those different areas. So the 0.9% could certainly be an actual European ancestor who, like you said, 4th to 10th great grandparent, somewhere in there. Sure, could also just be the fact that it is so hard to decipher all these different DNAs that there's some sort of DNA segment that they're assigning to more Southern European, but haven't really been able to figure it out because it's actually more of a South Central Asian thing. But it does show up commonly with some Southern Europeans. And then when you even consider the Cypriot in there, that kind of still goes along with that whole theme. Some of the next steps you can take include getting older relatives to test, most especially your parents or grandparents, but even aunts, uncles, and great aunts and great uncles, and maybe even older relatives. And then see, is it common amongst both sides of the family that they are getting this small amount of European? Or is it that one side of the family is actually commonly getting it, the other side isn't? If that's the case, then you can certainly make a hypothesis that there's some sort of European ancestral connection through that specific side of your family. And even better, if your parents or grandparents test, you may find that, your mom tests and she gets 5% Southern European, and then your grandma tests and she gets 9% Southern European. And then all of a sudden it's like you have this pretty clear answer that, yeah, you definitely have a European ancestor. And not only that, but you can get a better idea since mom and grandma got much better results and higher percentages. On to the next one. Large difference between Ancestry and MyHeritage. Hey Jarrett, so my question is, why are my results so different between the two sites? And I'd love for you to look at this in a video. More info in comments. So background on me is I'm 20, was born and still live in Australia. I know for a fact that I am a quarter Maori, but blood quantum says around 9%, which makes sense due to the random nature of DNA. I'm just confused as to why MyHeritage says I'm 17.8% Scandinavian, 3.6% Italian, and removes my Maori when Ancestry says only 3% Norwegian, with the range only being from 0 to 7% range, and mentions no Italian. I took the Ancestry test and uploaded my data to MyHeritage, and is that maybe the reason for the difference? Now looking at the results, Ireland 34%, Scotland 27%, England, Northwestern Europe 27%, Eastern Polynesia, New Zealand Maori 9%, Norway 3%. Then looking at the next image, this must be the MyHeritage, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh 78.6%, 17.8% Scandinavian, 3.6% Italian. So very interesting because, yeah, nothing is coming up. But below we got a great answer. And once again, it seems to be an answer from Buxus, and I also see Govir in there. So Both of them really active. Good job, both of you. Or I just hit a lot of the ones you guys have been commenting on. So starting out, Govir says England and Northwestern Europe does include Scandinavia, so those numbers might not be as different as you think. We look up here, we get 34% plus 27% plus 27% plus 3%, which is basically 91%. And then when we look here at the difference, Scandinavian, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, it basically comes to 96% or so. So in a sense, it seems that some of that Maori is being wrapped up with Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Norway, and then some of it's being lumped into this Italian. And then Govir mentions, I suspect that the disappearing Maori might be a case of not much of a reference population. And I would agree, that's probably what it is. And then for Buxus's comment, they mentioned doing something that I think is really vital in doing when comparing between results from different sites. And that's looking at the list of detected groups for the two services. So here they linked them, I'm not going to go to it, but you can look and see what groups are they defining, especially for all those people who test in an area like Albania and then go, why am I not getting specifically Albanian? Then you look at the testing reference populations and they don't even try to define it. They just define Balkan, or maybe they define something else. And Buxus mentions it looks like MyHeritage should match the Maori component to their Polynesian reference, but given that is not appearing, I'd suspect their current reference panel doesn't have sufficient samples to give a good set of markers which match Maori well. And I'm guessing that is probably the case. And I wouldn't be surprised if Maori is one of those population groups that is fairly underrepresented in a lot of studies. And because of that, it makes it much more difficult for a lot of these sites to actually define it. Now for the next one, DNA help. My DNA results are the following off of the most recent Ancestry DNA update. European Jewish 29%, Sweden, Denmark 24%, England, Northwest Europe 17%, Eastern Europe and Russia 16%, Ireland 6%, Wales 4%, Norway 3%, Sardinia 1%. My mother is half Ashkenazi Jewish, mostly from Minsk, Belarus, circa 1910s, immigrating to New York City, and half just English Southern States settler, going back to 1700s America's South. My father is half Eastern European, Ukraine, circa 1910s, immigrating to Ontario, Canada, and I also have Lutheran and Latvian ancestors on his half. And his other half is supposed to be like my mom's Southern States settlers. I'm confused where the Sardinian is coming from because it did not show up in my mom's DNA test. Hers is just half European Jewish, half English, Welsh, Scottish. My dad refuses to take a DNA test, but I don't know any way the Sardinian would come from the Eastern European side. Also, how did I get so much Scandinavian if I have roots primarily in the Southern South, where it's predominantly English, Irish, Scottish? So to start with the Sardinian, it's only 1%, so it is a trace result. And while maybe you do have some sort of Sardinian ancestry, it could also just be coming from some other European ancestry that you have. And it's just really not defining it that well, and so it's thinking it's Sardinian for whatever reason. It honestly could be coming through your mom's side or your dad's side, especially if they have Southern settlers, just because a lot of them were Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. It doesn't mean all of them were, and there were a lot of people immigrating to the southern United States that were not Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. So it's certainly possible that you have some sort of Sardinian, Italian, French, or something like that, and that's where that's coming from, and they settled in the United States in the South in maybe, the 1700s or 1800s or something, and you just didn't really know about them. And then for the Scandinavian, it's kind of a similar thing, especially in the sense that when we're looking at Northwestern European DNA, it's really hard to decipher because there's so much population migration between the Scandinavian countries and countries in current UK and even places in just general Northwestern Europe like France and Belgium and the Netherlands and Germany. So it could be a difficulty of reading it, could be some sort of a misread. Or it also could be that you have some sort of Scandinavian ancestor who settled in the southern United States. I know a lot of people think that most Scandinavians went and settled out west in, Montana, Wisconsin, places like that. And yeah, there were a whole lot of them that went out west like that, but there sure probably were some that came to the south. On to the next one. Ashkenazi Jewish with 59% Southern Italian DNA. I recently got a DNA test on Living DNA. My results showed I was 59% Southern Italian. I am an Ashkenazi Jew. I have researched my family tree back to the 1780s. My maternal family came from Poland, Kutno-Plok, and Tarnow. My paternal family came from Mogilev, Belarus, and Skala in Ukraine. The family came to London between 1883 to 1902. My results show very little Eastern European and British Isles. So down here we see the results: Europe 69%, Europe South 59%, Europe East 10.1%, Near East, Levant and Arabia 27.8%, North Africa 3.2%. So the first thing to say right off the bat, I know for a fact Living DNA doesn't have a population group of Jewish. So that means that no one is going to get a Ashkenazi Jewish or Jewish reading through Living DNA. What that also means is that if there is no population defined as Ashkenazi Jewish, they're going to have to define that DNA somehow else. And what they're going to do is they're going to define it with the groups that are most closely associated. So a lot of this is making sense, because what you often hear, at least what I've often heard, and I'd have to read the studies again to be doubly sure, but when it comes to the closeness of different population groups, Arab population groups are the most closely related to Jews, and then second most closely related are Italians. So it certainly would make sense that you would then get some Italian ancestry. And then it certainly also makes sense if you come from Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry that you might get Eastern European, because they're probably going to find a lot of that in Eastern Europe because so many Jews were in Eastern Europe, and a lot of people have Jewish ancestry and don't know about it. And of course, Levant, Arabia, and North Africa are all places that had a bunch of Jewish communities that thrived for centuries. So in the sense of Jewish history, looking at these results certainly makes a lot of sense, because it's basically a lot of places Jews have lived, and thus there might be a lot of Jewish DNA within that general population, and they don't define Jewish, so they're going to define it like that. And for anyone who'd like to see more about Jewish DNA results, you should actually check out my own DNA results video, because while I'm mostly Ashkenazi Jewish, I also have a very well traced out Sephardic ancestry. So in my video, I review a few different DNA test results from different sites, as well as my parents' results, so you get a really good view. So if you'd like to check that out, be sure to click right here. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. That really does help me out. You can also click right about here if you'd like to subscribe. It is completely free to do so. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at GenieVlogger. I'm the Genie Vlogger. See you in my next video.